Set the date and the time. I got recovery on my mind. Can you take this heartache off me?
Hello and welcome to Tilling It Like It Is, UGA Extension in Southeast Georgia's newest source for local, unbiased, research-based information about Georgia's #1 industry, agriculture. Today, I'm actually coming to you live with my co-host in my co-host home county of Emmanuel County in Swainsboro. And today's a little bit different than normal. We normally have a nice guest host with us, but unfortunately for y'all are just going to have to deal with us. So today is just going to be me and Savannah. As always, I'm Blake Carter. I'm in Effingham County, and Savannah Tanner is in Emmanuel County. And the reason for us choosing to do something a little different this podcast is because this past week we've kind of had a big event happen locally, and we all have experienced it one way or another with Hurricane Debbie coming through. So we wanted to kind of tailor this episode towards, what do we do? What are we doing right now? What are we seeing? How do we proceed, right? So I'm going to start by going into the segment, what's going on, and we're going to start by talking about one of the things that in Effingham we're seeing a lot, and we had a lot of this going on in other places as well, but with flooding, right? So today we're going to talk about well water specifically, because I think we focus a lot on the agricultural side of things as we've been doing our episodes, and for this event, it really impacts all of us, not just agriculture, but everybody. And this flooding could really impact our private well safety. So when we're talking about wells, in Effingham, we have a lot of city water, of course, but we also have a lot of people that have private wells. And I know in other counties, they're the same way. I know you can speak to that too, Savannah. There's a lot of people that have private wells. We have a private well ourselves. And so flooding actually will increase the risk of drinking water becoming contaminated with bacteria and other contaminants. And so that's something that in Effingham, we've done a lot of water testing over the last year. Probably in the last 2 years, I'll say that we've spiked in water samples coming through. So if y'all are questioning your water's quality and whatnot, go ahead and send it to one of our extension offices. We'll get it tested. But it's a growing trend for us. I think a lot of people are just kind of worried with all the shift in industry coming into Effingham and things like that. They're wanting to make sure nothing's happening with their water supply, and I totally understand that. Well, the same concept goes for when it happens with flooding. So there's, like I said, there's contamination from a bacterial standpoint and from a contaminant standpoint, but there's also foreign objects as well that can create personal injury. I know not everybody got some of the winds that we got in other parts of the state. I think the highest we got in Effingham recorded was like 45, 55 miles an hour, I think, winds at the max. But there are a few things that you can do and just some steps. And you can find a more detailed version of what I'm going to kind of summarize here online. You can go to UGA's extension website. It doesn't have to be county specific, or you can just type into Google well water after flood UGA and it'll come up. So it's a really good detailed publication. But first and foremost, you want to take note of what's going on. You want to inspect around the well and what's going on around it. So is there large debris that's being carried by flood water? This could mess up with the hardware and things of the well. Is there sediment or flood water entered an improperly sealed well? So is your well becoming contaminated because of that water leaching in? And then as flood waters compromise the well structure by washing material from under the well pad, this could cause actually collapsing to occur. In some of the heavier flooded areas, if you don't have things that are holding that dirt all together, that could be the case. So you want to kind of look at that. You also want to look at your electrical system. You want to make sure that, obviously, turn the breakers off before you look at this, but you want to just make sure that everything's working, the system's checked by an electrician. If there is thoughts of it being damaged of any kind, then you want to inspect the well pump itself. You want to kind of look over that. You can there are some different well contractors. I know we have a bunch in the county that can kind of give you advice if you're wondering if it's damaged or not, or if you need help on what needs to happen if it is damaged. Then there's the part that we really focus on as agents. We deal with a lot is the decontamination part, the bacterial contamination issues. So it's very important to kind of know if you've had issues in your well or if there is contamination going on. It's hard to see with the naked eye. So you can't just go out. I mean, sometimes, don't get me wrong, you might be able to see something's wrong. But there are a lot of times that a lot of these micro organisms and things, the bacteria, they're not going to be easily seen. So we're going to need to do some testing for that. You can come to our offices, get a water testing kit, or we have a microbiome kit that we lend out, or you can purchase that will test for E. coli and coliform. And I definitely recommend you doing that. The reason behind that is, those two can make you very, very sick. And it's really easy to kind of treat once we know it's there. We can do shock chlorination to the well. Now, there's a difference in it getting contaminated and we solving it once, and then there's a breach in your well. So what I said earlier about you inspecting the well, that's going to come into play here, because if there is any kind of breach, or if there's a problem structurally with the well, you shocking and cleaning your system does not solve the problem, and the bacteria can still come in there. So you want to make sure of that. That's why that inspection is super duper important. But you can do a shock chlorination of the well. We can decontaminate it. There's some really good step-by-step publication online talking about that. Some other things that you just might want to note if you're going to try to fix some of the issues. If there was structural stuff, you want to know the depth of the well itself. And there's some different, I guess, well drillers might have them, or EPD might even have them, where you can get the little cameras to actually go down into the wells to see if there is breaches and where it's at. You can also use that as a tool to measure the depth. If you're moving into a new place and you don't know necessarily, you can get somebody to come in and actually get that information for you. So, but like I said, those are some of the things that you want to know to actually solve the problem if there is a breaching. But the last thing I want to just make sure that you're aware of, all well waters and systems that have been impacted or potentially influenced by floodwaters should be considered unsafe until proven otherwise, if that makes sense. And that's just something that we want to make sure that we tell y'all is, if there was flooding in your private well area, go ahead and get you that water test. All right, we can't stress that enough, because we don't want you to have any issues. And even if you shock chlorinate and not do this, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources has even recommends you doing a water sample before you actually drink for that water for consumption. So while it might be safe in your eyes with the shock chlorination, we still really heavily recommend getting that water test done so we can make sure it's safe. Just because the water looks clean and clear doesn't mean it's safe to drink or consume. So just make sure you're aware of that. And that does also include washing vegetables with it. So keep that in mind. Like I said, that's what we really want to touch on with that what's going on segment this time, because we do think it's very important for us to get that information out there. And like I said, it's very accessible. And if you have questions or anything like that, reach out to your local extension office. They can even print these out for you. Now we're going to switch gears. Normally we would go to the row by row report, and we are going to do that, but it is going to be focused on disaster relief issues and things that we're seeing right now. And, in years past, since I've been working here, and Savannah, I know you've been working here a little longer than me, I've not seen a storm like this come through at this time of the year. Normally it's a little bit later, when maybe cotton's already opening up and things like that, where yield loss estimates are a little bit easier to calculate. We're kind of seeing that a little bit easier in the fields to kind of know what we're dealing with. With this storm, though, we're in a part of the year where the growth of the plant isn't at that point. So we don't necessarily know what's going to happen, right? So have you seen anything like this before?
This will be my 4th hurricane that I've worked in extension. The majority of them have been wind related, whether it was pecan trees down or cotton that's hanging out or twisted or on the ground. For the most part, it's always been wind related. Right. The difference with Debbie is, I don't think, yes, we have tangled cotton. Yes, we have corn that was ready to harvest that's on the ground. Yes, we have tobacco that's not looking great. Sesame, we flew the drone this morning and it's laying down. So yes, we did have some wind and some wind damage, but I think the majority of our damage that we may not see just how bad it is going to be rain and flood related. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. So in a situation of tobacco and sesame, we have a situation where both of those crops are great dryland crops. They don't like a lot of rain. They don't like a lot of moisture. And now that we have a lot of rain and we have a lot of moisture with those, we start seeing either fungal pathogens, bacterial pathogens that start killing them, or those plants just cannot hold up to the amount of rainfall that was there. So we've already started seeing those plants wilt significantly. Part of the problem was when you talk to somebody the day after Debbie, yeah, I think we're fine. Yeah, I think we're fine. And then in 3 days, it's a different picture.
Right.
And we're not fine anymore. We also see some cotton that's standing in water, peanuts standing in water. We've seen videos of people tubing in peanut fields. An excessive amount of water, which is what's really going to be, I think, the biggest part of our issue. So when you have tangled cotton specifically that we saw with the winds, slowing your applications down. Fortunately, we have GPS. A lot of times we can get back in there. Now, we may have to do some drone or crop duster applications, helicopter applications for things like our defoliation, and possibly any fungicide application that we have to make in our cotton. Most part, we certainly hope that the cotton that's laying down will stand back up. We are already seeing some of it trying to stand back up. And we certainly hope it continues to do that. That being said, we are still seeing some cotton in some standing water. Talked with Camp Hand shortly after. If it is in standing water, it can hold up for about 3 days, and after that, you're going to start seeing it lay down, or not lay down, but start wilting and deteriorating pretty quickly. So I think we probably are seeing some different pictures than we saw on Wednesday and Thursday of last week. Now, in reference to peanuts, same situation. The majority of the peanuts that I see are still in pretty good shape in reference to the amount of water. We do have some, again, that were absolutely flooded and they're gone. Again, we were looking at some of those in the drone this morning, several acres in low spots, places where there were already drain tiles. It's been, that particular area is wiped out for the most part. My biggest concern with peanuts doesn't necessarily stem from damage from the amount of water. It's going to be the inability to get back in the field, to catch up on our fungicide sprays, to get our insecticides out. We're seeing an increase in caterpillar pests. I'm starting to see white mold pick up pretty heavy in our area. And so if we were late, or even if we're getting to the point where it's time to spray, even if we weren't late and it's going to be a week or two before we can get in, that's not a great thing. I think we'll see more damage from that.
I think that's the biggest thing is for growing frustrations for growers or listeners out there. I know the timeliness. I know a lot of people pride themselves on that. So I know that that's probably one of the toughest challenges to just overcome, is just not being able to do anything about it. But I agree with you. I think that's a big, and same way with cotton. If you can't get in the fields with those with picks, if you can't slow it down,
foliar fertilizer,
fertilizers, you're going to run into some issues. You can run into some issues later season too. I mean, cotton ain't going to stop growing just because.
From an agent standpoint, by Wednesday, we had received 2 or 3 phone calls. Hey, I need a yield estimate. Hey, I need to know what was affected.
Right.
And I truly, of course, I'm a relatively young agent, but I truly don't think we'll have that estimate until we harvest it.
I agree with that. It's too early. There's a lot of factors to go on. I mean, you can obviously tell when peanuts are floating out the ground or cotton's dead, or peanuts are dead, but it's hard to tell what the impact on the plants that do turn around and start living, that are still living, they're going to finish out the season, what that's going to do to our yields. And I know me and you talked about it earlier. It's hard to say, okay, well, this is the direct cause of it, or this is how much we lost. The only thing, I told you this earlier, I mean, the best case to kind of even estimate that in a way would be to look at your averages for those fields. Because, I mean, it's going to be very hard to tell what that storm actually did, or the exact number of loss. But what you can do is, everybody knows their fields, all right? Y'all know the fields better than anybody else. So knowing your averages, you know what that field's normally going to produce. And with a outlier of an event like this, there could be good calls to say that this is how much it got off from the average.
Well, and I think one thing to kind of to talk about, and I try to tell all of my growers, no, we didn't have cotton open, so we don't see cotton on the ground in reference to the lint, which in a way is a good thing. All the other hurricanes that I worked, we would go pull to get an estimate the couple days before the hurricane hit. We'd pull a couple days after it hit to determine how much that got blown out on the ground. But one thing that I try to remind my producers is, no, you may not see the damage now, but you need to be contacting your FSA representatives. You need to be contacting your crop insurance representatives. You need to document and take pictures of everything. So a lot of these programs that have the potential of being activated, they may not be activated for a couple of years. So, for example, we just got an email from our FSA representative from 2022 about drought in pastures and hayfields. And so, I don't really remember exactly what happened in 2022. In reference to the weather. So making that keeping those documents, keeping those pictures, holding on to them is really going to be important, because there may be some funding that you get, several years down the road. One of the programs that I'm involved with I'm not involved with the program, but the FSA has contacted me in Emmanuel County to get some information on in reference to the farmers in our county is ECP, which is Emergency Conservation Program. And what that is if you had irrigation ponds that blew out because of the amount of rain, or you have some severe washouts, they will actually help you fix those. Now, here's the kicker to that. You can't start the cleanup process and the fixing process until they have evaluated it. And so, again, making those contacts with your crop insurance people, your FSA people, go ahead and get them on the books and let them see what you're dealing with now, so that you don't get caught with not being able to qualify for anything because you didn't do that.
Exactly. And there's, so the other thing to kind of think about with that is, we are a few days later than we say 3 days. There's some that require 3 days documentation or reporting before, so after the event, for you to be eligible to qualify. And I know we're a little bit later than that. But that being said, we're going into a week that we're still forecasting rain. We're still getting, in Effingham alone, in some spots, 2 inches just the past 2 days. So you're looking at something that could, yes, Debbie has gone, but there's still other chances for this stuff to happen. So if you did somehow miss the window for this past week, which I know most growers were probably on the phone with their crop insurance people or their agents or somebody very quickly after, think about that, because there's still chance for rain to become a potential issue down the road as well. And I spoke to Wade Parker, shout out to our Southeast agronomy agent, earlier this past weekend, and he gave a good piece of advice. He said it doesn't cost you to file the claim; you can cancel it anytime. So just think about that, because it's better to be prepared or to be not needing it, but being set up in case you needed it, than get down the road and need it, not have it.
Well, and one thing you mentioned earlier when we started is that it is early. So the earliest one that we had that I've been working was Irma, and that was mid-September, I'm thinking. And, honestly, there's still an opportunity for another one or some other natural disaster that we see. And so just making sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's with this one, and keep everything documented, and knowing where we're at going forward in this year is going to be super important.
And, I know it's kind of bad because we are being a little doom and gloom, and we are focusing on that side of things, of the loss side. But it is also worth mentioning that, our crops can rebound. It might not look good right away. And like we said, be prepared. So get in touch with your crop insurance and other people, other consultants and things like that, to kind of monitor the situation. But don't rush to try to fix something. We don't want to make hasty management decisions, because it might end up being that the crop turns around and is okay. Not everybody's fields, and try not to compare yourself to other people's fields either, because each field is going to act independently. And some of us will be more affected than others from this storm, and that's something to really make sure you remember, because it can get real tough to look at somebody else's that kind of bounce back, and maybe yours might not. But just remember, it's case by case, and not every field is created equal in that regard.
Well, and you can't quit farming
That's
what's
right.
out there.
That's
And
exactly
so
right.
just like we said that we may see some delayed fungicide applications, some delayed insecticide applications,
Yep.
we've still got to get out there. And that kind of brings back the point of there's a lot of, fortunately, we're in a technology world, and so we've got drones that are out there.
Yep.
We've got airplanes that are out there. Get with your county agent, find out who those people are, because you can absolutely use those to your advantage in a situation where you can't get out there. I suspect we'll use more drones and airplanes this year than we've used in years past because of that. So we have to keep going, and best case scenario, it's not as damaging as we suspected to
Yep.
begin with.
That's right.
That's what we're hoping for. The good thing in relevance to the cotton is that it wasn't open,
Yep.
because it could very much so cause an issue had those bowls been open and we got 15 inches of rain on it or more in some situations. So, but we are also dealing with a whole nother natural disaster. Just as much as my phone rang about Debbie last week, it rang just as much, if not twice as much, about armyworms. And they are relentless this year. You're seeing them in soybeans. We're seeing them in pastures and hayfields. Bahia grass, we rarely see them in Bahia grass.
Yep.
I got a Snapchat from our ag teacher this morning. They were in the classroom this morning when he walked in. They're in lawns. They're in, again, soybeans, corn, young corn specifically. So we're seeing them pick up just about anywhere. And honestly, they have been rather catastrophic this year. So we're going to talk a little bit about them. One of the questions that I've gotten a lot of is, why is my pyrethroid not working? That's a hard answer, because when we look at them in a lab setting, we don't see significant resistance. I'm saying we don't find any, because there's a little bit of resistance in whatever chemical you're using, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. We can find that in a lab a lot of times. That being said, I think one of the reasons why we're seeing those pyrethroids not work as well is the life cycle.
Yep.
And so the life cycle for an armyworm, from the time that egg hatches until it turns into an adult moth that's laying eggs, is about 30 days.
Yep.
And the warmer the weather is, the quicker that life cycle is going to speed up.
Progress, yeah.
Well, when you have your insecticides, your pyrethroids, that only have a residual of less than 7 days, sure, you've killed those adults, but now you've got these young ones coming in. And so you're not having any kind of residual out there. One of the more common ones is Mustang Max and Tombstone. And that's what we've always sprayed, and that's why we like spraying it. But again, that's less than 7 days of residual. Well, we add Dimilin to it, and that might give us 15, 16 days of residual, maybe a little more. But we still, if you're cutting hay every 28 to 32 days, you still have a gap there.
Yep.
And so it's important to make sure that we are picking the right chemical, but also the right protocol.
Yep.
In determining what we need to do to manage it. And so if you're on the Georgia Forages Facebook page, Dr. Baxter posted a really good resource today, a decision guide to help you decide what is the best option for you and your thing. And so your operation. So if that grass is less than 6 inches tall and you've got worms that are 1/8 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch long, we probably can spray. and be fine. I have been recommending sprays with a little more residual, so I would not spray any pyrethroid without a Dimilin application attached with it. But I've been recommending a lot of Vanacore, a lot of Besiege, and a lot of Intrepid because you're going to get closer to 24, 28 days worth of residual by using those products versus the pyrethroids and the Dimilin. So if it's less than 6 inches tall and you have an armyworm that's less than 3/4 of an inch long, you can treat it and be okay. The problem comes in is where those armyworms are larger than 3/4 of an inch long, and none of our insecticides are labeled for armyworms that are larger than 3/4 of an inch long. If you have very large ones, your best option is to go ahead and mow it. Doesn't matter how old it is, doesn't matter when you're projected to cut it. You're just better off to go ahead and cut it. What if it's in the middle? What if you've got smaller worms and you've got your grass that's growing? What do we do then? What if they've got into them and hurt them? Essentially, if they have some of the damage, depending on where that damage is in the canopy, you're also better off to clip the top of it so that you can get those growing points back stimulated and back growing well. One of the questions I have gotten though is, what do I do if they ate everything? Well, if they ate everything, you still have to cut. You still have to get that growing point back going, unfortunately. You're better off to mow it, and then you're going to want to come in within a couple of days when you get some growth on it and come in and spray with some sort of residual insecticide. Unfortunately, they, again, have been super relentless this year. One thing I do think that we see some issues with, just kind of switching back gears to the pyrethroids, is we always get in a hurry. When we've got them, we've got ample acres to spray, and we've got 100 other things to do. And unfortunately, we will slow down and we will put out more water, which requires us to slow down even more. We're going to see better coverage with those pyrethroids if that's what we're going to use. Because that life cycle is speeding up because of how warm the weather is. Again, I kind of go back to those pyrethroids. If you're having to come across the field 2 or 3 times in a cutting, that adds up. So the Vanacore, the Prevathon, that's $16 an acre, really ain't as expensive as you think by the time you couple 2 or 3 times with a pyrethroid across the field.
That's what I was gonna say. I think the number one thing I get when I recommend these things is which one's the cheapest, what's the cost, and like you just said, 3 trips over a field adds up extremely fast compared to that one time gets you your best bang for your buck, and it might be I put it like this: some people don't like to spend a large chunk at once, but they'd rather spend it 3 or 4 times. They'd rather space it out. Well, spacing it out doesn't always mean it's the best option.
Well, and with the pyrethroid only lasting 4 to 5 days, you're waiting to spray or waiting to cut in 28 days. I mean, it's going to add up very quickly trying to go over. Even if you do your Dimilin, that's going to last 20-ish, and I say ish because it may not last that long. It depends on so many factors. You don't know how long it's going to last. So even if it's only lasting 20-ish days, it's also not going to kill your adults. It's going to prevent them from getting any larger. So I just think that using some of these residuals like Vanacore, like Besiege is going to be important. One thing I do want to point out is the grazing and harvest intervals. So like with Besiege, there is a 7-day harvest interval. So if you're going to be cutting in a week anyway, you're probably fine to come on in with a pyrethroid, slow down with your application, increase your amount of water, get a good kill on them. You're probably fine with that. But if you're having to spray when that hay is only a week old, then your Besiege absolutely has a place in your program. Another one, you don't hear it a lot, but it is labeled as 7.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that both the grazing and harvest interval is 2 weeks on that particular product. So you're not going to be able to graze your cattle on it if it's in your pasture, and you're not going to be able to cut hay for 14 days after that too. N8, that's the one. It does have a 7-day grazing interval, but only a 3-day harvest interval. So just pay attention to those when you can start back grazing. I will point out that every chemical that we talked about in reference to armyworms is specific to pastures and hay fields.
Yep.
Does not include soybeans, does not include corn, or even your yards.
Yep.
So if you're having armyworms in other crops outside of pastures and hay fields, you'll want to contact your county extension agent to get a game plan for that.
Yeah, I was just, and you were in the truck when I was talking to him. One of my growers, one of our last remaining soybean growers, I say that. We got some other guys that are doing a little bit of beans too in the county, but he's the main guy. He's the bean man for sure. This time of year he was out there looking at, and this is about the time we start looking for making a decision whether to spray for the worms too in beans. And we were talking, he hasn't seen as many armyworms, but he is seeing loopers, so it goes back to just knowing what you got out there too. Don't just assume, get out there and look and then make the decision, and make sure you're on label for the product. Like Savannah said, you want to make sure you're in the right crop, it's on label for that crop, and you're following directions properly for it. But get out there and look, because not just armyworms are out there, loopers are out there too, moving now. So you've got a lot of activity that could potentially need looking at. And I haven't seen many in peanuts yet. Have you seen?
Starting to see, well, for the last couple of weeks, we've seen different ones, loopers, armyworms, clover worms, things like that, pop up in some peanut situations. So again, making sure you're with peanuts specifically, making sure that you're scouting, knowing how many's out there, but also knowing which worm is out there, because that's going to be a huge part of deciding what application is best when in reference to peanuts. And so.
And one way to check for that, I don't know if y'all ever scouted your own peanut. One, you can call a county agent; they can come out there anytime and help you out. But you can also use a beat sheet. I don't know if you just got a white sheet, you can use it. I use a bedroom sheet or something cheap like that, or something that's white that you can see the different things you own. When you're out there, you can use that and kind of beat the plants off. I think it's 3 row feet, right, of plants, and you can actually see what you got out there, because when we talk about growth stage or the insect stages for that life cycle, you're going to see stuff that's super tiny you would not be able to see with your naked eye on that plant without it being on something like a white background. And that's going to help you determine you're not just looking for the big ones, you're also looking for the small ones too.
My guys send me a lot of pictures too. And so when it comes to peanuts, one thing we want to pinpoint on, determine if you have velvet beans or loopers or things like that. Yes, we need a picture of the worm. We also need a picture of those prolegs. We need to know how many prolegs are going to be on that caterpillar. So really and truly, I guess the take home when it comes to peanuts is just call your county agent, talk to them, have them come out to determine what you're going to be fighting. But in reference to everything, I'm not hopeless. I think we've got a lot of potential. I think the important message of today is to talk with your consultant, talk with your scout, talk with your county agent, talk with your sales reps, talk with them, and make good, informative, beneficial management decisions going forward, because again, I'm not hopeless. I think there's still a lot of really good potential in all of our crops, in forages and hay fields, in peanuts, in soybeans, in cotton. But I think tight margins and the fact that we are likely going to see some sort of yield loss in a lot of these crops is to just going forward make good economical and sustainable management decisions until the end of the year.
I agree. We're not done. The season's not over yet. The season's just getting heated and getting into it. We are getting close to where, in the next few weeks, we might be starting to look at when getting to September peanut maturity and things like that, as we're getting closer and closer to that. Some of us will be starting to check our peanuts come September, but it's not, it's not over. We got a long way to go. A lot more days for those plants to recover and grow. But also with that, make sure that you're aware of what's coming, when it comes to weather coming forward. Make sure you're documenting everything. If you need a really quick just resource guide, if you type in Farmer Disaster Assistance UGA, there is a publication that shows up where it has the different forms for those programs that are for different crops that are linked to it, and you can just click on that and it'll take you right to the form. Most of y'all probably already are in some of these programs and probably already know about them, but if you don't, this is a great resource to kind of go into and kind of look at what are the steps, all that good stuff. If you haven't checked out the Cotton Teams podcast or the Peanut Teams podcast, definitely look at those because they're giving some very good detailed insight on those two specific crops. So if you are majority the cotton and peanuts, go check those out because they're going to give you real time alerts and what's going on and what they're seeing in the crop as well statewide. So we want to really push that as well. Samantha, is there any upcoming events that we have? I know a lot of them got canceled or shifted because of the storm, and I do want to say we do apologize for the Midville thing. I know we really missed out on that. We're having to put that on hold because of the storm that just came through, but we know that Midville will be back, and don't worry on that. There'll be more to come from that, but we appreciate y'all at least listening to our last one talking about Midville, and I hope that gave y'all some insight on what we have down here in Southeast. And there's so many other research stations, and there's some other farms that we're going to talk about throughout the year that Southeast District specifically has that are little gems like Midville. So keep that in the back of y'all's minds too as you're listening, because we hope to share some more from some other farms as well. But did you see anything?
Yes. So while we were actually talking, Aubrey sent me a message about the citrus update that we had talked about earlier. It was rescheduled to Friday the 20th at 9:30. And so get with your county agent or contact Ross Green in Candler and Evans County or Aubrey in Tattnall County to get registered for that. A couple of other things is the Georgia Peanut Tour is September the 17th through the 19th in Americus. And so if you're interested in that, I actually think that's put on with the Peanut Commission. And so get with your agent or contact them for more information on that. As far as anything else, just call your agent. They all have, a lot of them, we're going to be scheduling some end of year harvest meetings going, from this point forward. How do I manage? How do I do? I think this is a great year to attend some of those events.
I did. While you were talking, you just made me think about it too. So if y'all are around Bullitt County in the next day, tomorrow is the rescheduled Peanut Shade Tree meeting. That is the annual Peanut Shade Tree meeting. It's a big deal with Mr. Bill Tyson over there. He's the agent there. He's been doing this meeting since he started back in Effingham. He's been kind of carrying this tradition on. So we were talking about that end of year, mid-year meeting kind of type of deal. And this one's a good opportunity. It's going to start tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's August 13th. So make sure if y'all are listening to this before then, try to attend if you can. But if you get it later, if y'all have information or want information from that, I'm sure if you reached out to his office, he would be able to give you some more. Last few things I wanted to kind of just mention. We are getting into some of the episodes in the future. We're going to talk about some of that maturity and some of that end of season decision making as we go forward in the next few episodes. We're also going to talk fair season is right on the horizon. So if y'all are in our area, Bullitt County area or Effingham, we both have our county fairs, the Kiwanis Fair in Bullitt County, and then we also have the Effingham Fair in Effingham County coming up in October. We also have Perry coming up. We have livestock shows coming. So we'll do some more different episodes focused on some of those things and some of those events and updates on that as we go as well. But we do really appreciate y'all tuning in today. Like I said, it was a little bit different, but last thoughts on what we talked about. Be optimistic. Don't give up. Keep going. Time will tell just what the effects of the storm was, but we're very optimistic and we're hopeful. So, but as always, until our next episode, keep tilling it like it is, and we'll see y'all real soon. Thank you.